Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You will know.
I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. Hey, boy, don't feel my world untrue. Yeah, I want to talk to you. My world can be true if you do what I tell you to. I want to talk to you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This one is for Saturday, the 27th of August, 2016. I'm your host, Larry Love. We're here every week to bring you the latest information for medical and recreational adult use cannabis from all over the globe. This week, we have news for you always, and of course we have a guest interview with Abe Cohn from the THC Legal Group in Cleveland, Ohio. We're going to be talking about all things cannabis legal and what's happening in Ohio. But first, as always, as you know, I've got news for you. 1, 2, 3.
I've got news for you.
Yes, that's right. I've got news for you, and this is from ganjapreneur.com, which is a great site for all kinds of information. The Denver Bud Company submits samples for Organic Cannabis Association approval. And this is by T.J. Brandfault Jr., and this was from yesterday, the 26th of August. The Denver Bud Company expects to have their first product certified by the Organic Cannabis Association within the next few months, according to a Modern Farmer report. However, the product can be called neither organic nor USDA certified due to federal cannabis prohibition. The $5,000 certification process requires up to 4 inspections with samples collected during each round. The certification comes with a pesticide-free label and lasts 1 year with random site inspections throughout to ensure the company is maintaining best practices. The OCA process is designed to be even more rigorous than the USDA organic certification process. Based on what we heard today, it sounds like there may be some small adjustments the inspector will recommend, Ben Gelt, OCA co-founder, said in the report. Josh Eagle, E-G-L-E, Denver Bud Company founder, believes the process will pay for itself once the product is brought to market. He grew pesticide-free cannabis for his mother to treat her multiple sclerosis before he even entered the formal industry. We got into this business to be the good guys, he said. It's important to me that the product we put out is helping people instead of hurting people. The OCA says that dozens more Colorado growers are seeking approval from the body, and hundreds more have inquired about the process. The association hopes to certify 5 more growers by the end of the year. Once again, that's from ganjapreneur.com. And of course, that's great news to medical patients and recreational patients that things will be as organic as they can make them to be. Next up, a big advocate and a scientist and a doctor is Dr. Sunil Agrawal. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. He's done lots of stuff on the internet, and he's an amazing guy. This is a short part of his speech from last week at the Seattle Hemp Fest.
Give it up for DFCR. Check out our website. We've got some pretty cool doctors on our advisory board. honorary board. We got former Surgeon General under the Clinton administration. We've got like pretty top doctors at big medical centers across the country. I just want you to know that these group of highly educated, highly placed doctors, are right there with us, calling for descheduling of cannabis, out of the whole Controlled Substances Act nonsense. Totally, Chinese crazy knot. I don't know what there's a famous handcuff thing where you can't get out of it. That cannabis is tied up in knots in the federal drug control system, and we are saying you just got to cut that whole knot, get cannabis out of federal control and into a situation where we have more local control of cannabis. So what I want to tell you about is the latest decision that the Drug Enforcement Administration laid down on us, we the people who pay their salaries, on why cannabis should stay in Schedule 1. And why you want to know this is because they are ruining science. They are ruining and torturing science by keeping cannabis in this category, which says high potential for abuse and no medical use for safety.
Again, high potential for abuse and no medical use. This is the reasoning. Then, of course, we all know about 6630507, the U.S. patent, where the government, HHS, the Health and Human Services, have patented 6630507. There's a great organization out there that talk to the hand. People are writing 6630507 on their hands and posting pictures. And check them out at 6630507.com, where you can put your picture up. You can also find some great links to the science, the real science, if you would like to try to convert some of the naysayers. 6630507.com. Next up, in Indiana, veterans are looking to legalize medical cannabis for treatment. It's important. These guys and gals were out there protecting us.
Legalizing marijuana has been a long-time debate with Indiana state lawmakers, but so far, nothing has passed.
Yeah, new at 10, one Indiana veteran is trying to use his story to persuade lawmakers to change their minds. WSBT 22's Heather Black is at the live desk for us. And Heather, why does he think it's time for a change?
Well, the Indiana Marine is wanting to see a change because of the amount of prescription drugs that have been given to him and fellow veterans by the VA. The abuse of prescription drugs is a growing epidemic in Indiana. While lawmakers look for ways to treat the problem, some Indiana veterans are trying to prevent it, starting with the VA.
I started going to the VA, and from there on it was pills, pills, pills.
Tarter says after years of prescription drugs, he found himself dealing with addiction and eventually overdosing on the pills from the VA.
Nobody leaves without a grocery sack full of pills.
That's why Indiana Marine veteran Jeff Staker created a new nonprofit organization to help persuade lawmakers to legalize medical marijuana.
There needs to be alternative. Overall benefit, it's going to save lives.
Back in May, House of Representatives approved allowing VA doctors to recommend medical marijuana to their patients, only where the treatment is legal. Indiana is still not on the list. Staker says his VA doctor would be for medical marijuana.
Surprisingly, got an overwhelming response in favor.
And Indiana lawmakers have shown little interest in making medical marijuana legal in the state. Now, because the federal government still considers the drug a controlled substance, the VA cannot prescribe it or enroll patients in the state's program. At the live desk, Heather Black, WSBT 22 News.
Now, moving over to Ohio, and we will be talking about Ohio with Abe Cohn in just a little bit after the break. Here's a report on what's happening on Ohio, and then Abe will update us as well.
You can now add Ohio to the growing list of states where medical marijuana will be legal. House Bill 523, which Governor Kasich signed into law back in June, will take effect here in the Buckeye State on September 8th. But Ohio Representative Dan Ramos, one of the sponsors of the bill, says don't run to your doctor for a prescription just yet.
The Department of Commerce will license the cultivators, the processors, and the labs, whereas pharmacy will license the dispensary.
3 government agencies will be laying out the plan over the next several months for the creation of the Medical Marijuana Control Program. $1.8 million will now be used by the State Pharmacy Board, Department of Commerce, and State Medical Board to register marijuana dispensaries, hire staff, and manage patient caregiver registration. Patients would also have to qualify for certain medical conditions, including Alzheimer's and MS, with written permission from a physician.
The stories that I've heard, particularly involving younger children having seizures and that, and if it helps them, I think it would be a good thing.
I think if people need it and it helps, I think it should be legal.
For those wanting to own a dispensary, Representative Ramos says it will be similar to obtaining a license to run a business. Background checks will be conducted, and the dispensary will have to be a certain distance away from schools.
It would not allow for home grow or small things. You would have to basically be in the business of producing marijuana.
Well, that's a shame that they're not allowing for home grow. I mean, that's puts people's medicine right in their own hands. Of course, everybody can't grow, but maybe they can change that in the future. Next up, we'll move over to Southwest Florida. That's the Deep South. We have a couple stories about Florida here, and it's the South, and there's still people down there that don't understand the science. And here's some doctors in Southwest Florida that say no to medical cannabis. These are scientists. Doctors should be scientists, and they're saying no.
Well, just say no to medical marijuana. That's the message from some Southwest Florida doctors who don't want to see Amendment 2 passed in the upcoming elections. NBC2's Graham Hunter talked with some of those doctors when they met tonight to discuss the law which would allow medical pot.
Lisa, one thing we talked about, medical professionals in Florida are still cleaning up the mess that came from the pill mill epidemic, where some doctors were giving patients who didn't need them access to powerful pain medications. The concerns that legalized medical marijuana would create a similar environment for abuse.
People can misrepresent themselves to get medical marijuana.
Dr. Jonathan Daitch runs advanced pain management and spine specialists in Fort Myers. And under Florida's newly passed legislation, he can legally prescribe low THC Charlotte's Web.
And it took a long time to get the proper legislation with the proper safeguards.
It's Dr. Daitch's view that Amendment 2 isn't the right next step.
As a physician, I don't want medical marijuana to be the lead-in to legalization of marijuana.
He worries medical marijuana will make it easier for kids to get pot, and also that this state will see a repeat of pill mills.
The potential is there for the same thing to happen with pot mills.
But the medical community in Fort Myers is divided on the subject.
I look at it like another tool in my toolbox.
Dr. Daryl Morris is also allowed to prescribe Charlotte's Web. He says Amendment 2 is about creating more options for patients.
It's not frontline treatment. It's designed to be, you've tried these other things and you're not really happy with that treatment, or it's not going that well.
Amendment 2 failed in 2014, receiving just 57% of the vote. 60% of voters will have to vote yes in order for Amendment 2 to pass in November. Reporting live in the studio, Graham Hunter, NBC2.
There's pill mills because asshole doctors are writing scripts because they're getting paid by Big Pharma. That's why there's pill mills, because some doctors are just unscrupulous and just want to take money and dish out pills. This next report is also about Florida. This is the Bay Area part of Florida, and this is the opposite. They think that the new medical marijuana dispensary, just one of them that's opening up, is just not enough.
A Bay Area mother just getting the green light to get her son medical marijuana, something she's been fighting years for. But new at 6, ABC Action News reporter Serena Fazan shows us the cloud of uncertainty still hanging over her family.
He looked at Brandon and said, "Hey, buddy, I need you to wake up."
Renee Petro's life came crashing down 6 years ago. Her healthy 8-year-old boy suddenly started seizing. She kept hearing him say,
"It hurts. Stop hurting me."
Brandon's seizures never stopped. He suffers from a rare form of epilepsy. Renee has documented his struggles, fighting for relief for years. it finally came.
We finally have dispensaries that are here.
The first one locally opened just last week. Her son is the first patient at his doctor's office to get on the patient registry.
While I want to jump up and down and say this is amazing, it's still not enough.
She has two main concerns. While Brandon can't go to school, she feels strongly that educators need to be up to speed for the kids that can. Her top worry, people knowing what is legal.
There still needs a lot of education. Law enforcement needs to be open to learning how they could access the patient registry.
She will rally for what she has seen in other states. Every patient and caregiver getting a certificate, a form of proof that they are not breaking the law for having low doses of marijuana. Renee saw it done in California, where Brandon went for treatment. She realizes dispensaries are new and there's lots to learn. She just hopes on making it a smooth process. Serena Fazan, ABC Action News.
And you'll have a chance this November to decide if Florida should expand the use of medical marijuana. Amendment 2 will also require the Department of Health to issue ID cards to patients and caregivers.
Okay, well, Florida's got a lot to work out, that's for sure, but they are on their way. Next up, speaking of working things out, New York's program has just been a disaster, and that's really because of Governor Cuomo, who is just being too conservative, and he's not getting it. So the New York Health Department is issuing recommendations to fix the state's flawed rollout of their medical cannabis program. Here's this report.
I just think it's kind of ridiculous that 2 years after the bill's passed, they are now basically going back to put all the stuff in that Governor Cuomo took out.
Medical marijuana back in the spotlight tonight, a new effort to make sure the people who need it the most can actually get it. We are taking a closer look at that proposal to expand the state's program. I'm Janet Lomax.
And I'm Pat Taney. Some people very happy about this latest effort. However, there are still major concerns tonight about the entire program. Amanda Shavari looking into these new efforts. She joins us now in our studio. Amanda.
Pat and Janet, the report from the State Department of Health is 13 pages long and has 12 recommendations. We're going to break down a couple of them for you. First, the state is asking to add an additional 5 growers over the next 2 years. They would also like to see an increase in the number of brands allowed here in New York State. And this one affects schools. They would like medical staff in the school to administer medical marijuana.
My first reaction is, well, it's about time, and they're all of the regulations that they initially took out.
Christine Emerson's daughter Julia has epilepsy and needs medical marijuana to help reduce her seizures.
When I have a seizure, my whole body shakes.
Is that scary?
Yeah.
Christine has been pushing for access to medical marijuana for years, even after it was legalized. She wants to see the program available to more people who really need it. And for her, today is a step in the right direction.
Well, I think patients will have more accessibility.
For the last year, we've been pushing to try to find out exactly how many doctors in New York State are certified. We finally got those numbers. Out of 90,000 doctors in the Empire State, only 639, less than 1%, are certified. Locally, it's only 26 doctors. And according to the Department of Health's report through June 15th, New York was averaging fewer than 1,500 medical marijuana purchases per month, something that many people feel is putting the entire program in jeopardy of failing.
I'm extremely worried about the program in New York. There's not a ton of physicians. I don't think there's very many patients. And, for a cost point, I mean, it's extremely expensive. Our out-of-pocket is $1,000 a month for her medication.
Assemblyman Dick Gottfried sponsored the medical marijuana bill back in 2014 and says today these recommendations don't go far enough to help the program.
Why are they recommendations? This is the health department making recommendations to itself. Why isn't the department announcing that they are taking these actions?
And on that note, I did reach out to the health department today, and they say within the next 2 weeks they're going to be releasing more information about what the next steps are for medical marijuana. And we're going to put this 13-page report at WHUC.com so people can read it for themselves.
And of course, people hoping this will increase availability. One of the things, a lot of people calling for making a list of certified doctors public.
Yeah, that's exactly what a lot of people want, and the Department of Health says is recommending that. Point blank, patients say something needs to be done. The problem's so bad that the Breast Cancer Coalition of Rochester says that many of the patients are actually getting marijuana illegally because the time frame for the program, it just doesn't work with them.
Tough situation.
situation for a lot of people there. Amanda, thank you.
$1,000 a month it's costing that family in New York to help their child. It's just amazing. We'll be right back with our guest, Abe Cohn, right after this.
It's all about the 420 MMJ Radio.
PTSD, MS, glaucoma, seizures. All of these diseases have seen beneficial impacts with medical marijuana. It's outrageous that the federal government is saying there's no medical use. And until they move from Schedule 1, they are literally saying that.
Help the average person understand the difference between a Schedule 1 drug and a Schedule 2 drug.
Well, it's really simple. Schedule 1 drug has no medical use, and a Schedule 2 drug has medical uses.
Marijuana does not meet the definition of Schedule 2, and you can create those products, and we should do that.
Clearly, Schedule 2 is easier to access.
It's a small difference.
Well, then why are you resisting that difference then? To deny people medicine that can help them based upon some idea that this might create a problem or a slippery slope, that undermines the common sense of things we already are doing.
It's stuck in the 60s. People wanted to demonize this as a hippie drug that had no value and not actually study it.
Have you written to the president or asked
Yes,
the
they'll
president?
say there's not a body of research that shows the medical effects in U.S. literature.
Legalizing marijuana, whether it's medical marijuana or recreational use. Right now, that is not federal policy.
Well, surprise, surprise, it's a Schedule 1 drug. Of course there's not a body of research because you've precluded that research from being done. It's a catch-22.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show.
Hi, this is Anthony Franciosi from the Honest Marijuana Company, and you're listening to Medical Marijuana Radio.
And we're back. And online today, I have from the THC Legal Group in Cleveland, Ohio, Abe Cohn. Welcome to Medical Marijuana Radio, Abe.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, yeah. Me too, man. About 10 days or 2 weeks ago, the DEA decided not to change the schedule. What did you think of that? Were you expecting that, or did you think something else was going to happen?
You know, it's really a shocking proclamation by the DEA. So under Schedule 1 of the CEA, which is the Controlled Substance Act, if a certain substance makes it to the Schedule 1 level, the suggestion is that it is tremendously dangerous with zero medicinal benefit. So naturally, many people are shocked at almost the vulgarity of this sort of proclamation. And considering the Obama administration's view on cannabis, and often it's, at least it's kind of tacit approval for some of the statewide legalization schemes, many people thought that the DEA would in fact reschedule it and remove it from the Schedule 1 category. So I, along with many other people, were absolutely surprised and chagrined. Yeah, disappointed.
Now, there's been some positive spin out of this. Do you believe that the positive spin that this leaves it open for, let's say, Congress or the president to do something himself?
Yeah, I mean, the positive spin comes from, interestingly, from constitutionalists. So, you know, much of, beyond the substance of a law is kind of a deeper principle of the power that is creating that law. So many people, of course, don't want the Obama administration, the executive branch, any sort of body of the executive branch to be in charge of making these decisions. So the idea is that if the DEA is not in charge of rescheduling it and we kind of shift the power back into the court of the people and to Congress, it'll be rescheduled and potentially even eliminated in what people perceive to be a much more democratic way. But I think honestly that's really just a naive half glass full way of looking at it. I don't particularly care for that argument, and I think it's appalling. I mean, imagine that. Cannabis has zero medicinal benefit and is hugely dangerous. I mean, that's what it means to be a Schedule 1 under the CSA. So
Right, but at the same time, Abe, okay, Health and Human Services, who actually was involved with this decision, owns. They have the patent 6630507 that is contradictory to their public statements that say that there is no medicinal value, when the patent says that there is for many different diseases and afflictions. And there's people out there now that are writing 6630507 on their hands and posting them on 6630507.com, where there's some great information for people as well. So how do we deal with this hypocrisy?
Well, yeah, this is an interesting question. One of the central issues with the CSA's designation of, quote, marijuana in the law is that it doesn't entirely specify what marijuana is. And this is something that we're dealing with right now with clients and other companies interested in getting into the CBD business, or the name is always difficult to pronounce, but the
cannabidiol?
Right, yeah, or CBD. So the word marijuana itself is not explicitly designated or delineated as far as what stage of the plant would actually render it, quote, marijuana, instead of maybe just kind of a generic plant, or at what point does the plant turn into marijuana? Is it at the seed level? Is it at the stalk level? Is it when bud is actually on the leaves? So with CBD, for example, you can extract it either from the stalk, the hemp stalk, which is not, as history has borne out, considered to be illegal under the Schedule 1 category of CSA, or in its more potent forms, it can actually be derived directly from a more advanced stage cannabis plant in the form of marijuana. So I'm not necessarily sure I agree with this characterization of hypocrisy. I think more than anything else, it's demonstrative of a lack of precision on the government's part of specifying what is or is not marijuana, and how we should, both as a medical community and also as individuals concerned with public policy, how we should view cannabis. So
let me ask you this. I'll interrupt right there.
Yeah.
There's some conflicting information in my head. Maybe I've read something wrong, but somebody has made a definition that cannabis or hemp, I guess hemp, which is cannabis.
Well, not exactly.
Well, but they've made a definition that if it's got less than point whatever THC in it, then it's legal. Okay, and this is how the CBD industry is selling CBD in every state. So who is the one that set that point to where they say anything below point whatever it is legal, and above is considered cannabis?
Well, as far as I know, that's not exactly how the law breaks down. But off the top of my head, what I recall is that considering the potency of the substance is kind of secondary to first asking where the substance was derived from. So if in fact the CBD was extracted from the hemp stalk, which is in and of itself somewhat of a derivative of the stalk, before it reaches full growth maturity and kind of transitions almost metaphysically, right, into cannabis, into marijuana, at that point, you're allowed to extract CBD from it, from that hemp stalk. Now, as it turns out, you do not get as potent of a batch of CBD from hemp stalks. But if, for example, you were able to, I'm just making these numbers up, but if you were able to extract, let's say, 0.8 whatever potency, however that measurement is defined, from a hemp stalk versus 0.2 from a different hemp stalk, I'm not sure it's accurate to say that one would be legal or one would not be. Really, the critical question is where it is derived from.
Really, that's really interesting, because look, I'm sure that the hemp plant is very much like the cannabis sativa, afghanica, indica. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, when thinking of the cannabis plant, you get more cannabinoids out of the flower and the leaves than you do from the stalk. So
precisely.
So Go ahead.
Right. If you were to extract CBD from the cannabis leaves, where you're getting the greatest amount of potency of the CBD, that would absolutely violate Schedule 1 under the CSA, and that is illegal. Interestingly, as another kind of twist in the storyline, even if you were to extract the CBD from hemp stalks, which is not, as we said, regulated under Schedule 1 of CSA, the cultivation of the hemp stock is regulated under Schedule 1 CSA. So you're not allowed to actually extract CBD rather, from hemp stocks that are grown within the United States. Instead, you have to import the CBD from hemp stocks that were grown outside of the United States. And that kind of adds another wrinkle into the storyline.
Well, what about, the legal hemp that's being grown in Colorado and Kentucky
Right.
and other places? So how does that get defined?
Right. So, as you know, citizens in the United States really are governed by two bodies of law. We are both subject to the law of the state, and of course, we're subjected to the law of the land, the greater land, which is the United States. So if, in fact, you were to purchase CBD oil from a hemp stock that was grown within a state that has legalized cannabis, under the state laws, you're perfectly within the parameters of the system, and you did not do anything wrong. But that does not mean that you're still not violating the federal CSA Schedule 1 laws. And of course, the question of whether or not any sort of federal governmental body would come and intervene, they likely wouldn't. Especially recently, we had the famous Mayo case, which we're really just kind of getting into. It was I think the ruling came out even last week, or substantial policy implications of the ruling were kind of really broken down in the last 2 weeks. But the fact that you are doing something according to the law of the state does not mean that you're exempt from federal law.
Right. So, for example, let's say, the legal hemp growers that have been growing for at least 2 seasons in Colorado, they extracted, they make some great CBD oil that's got less than the THC. Can they ship that across state lines?
Oh, it's a tricky question. One of the questions is, where are they shipping it to?
Well, I mean, even if they were shipping it to, let's say, New Mexico, I'm just a border away from them, but we are legal medicinally here. So, are you saying it would be different for them to ship it here than it would be to Nebraska?
I certainly don't want to go on record with this, but I would strongly caution that, just to keep in mind that whether or not we're asking two questions. Is it legal on a state level, and is it legal on a federal level? And if you're shipping something that is, in fact, illegal on a federal level, then I would imagine that you would not be able to. But
CBD products are being shipped all over across state lines. I mean, even Georgia, I believe, has got something in their medical cannabis program that they can go across the state lines and get their oil. So, I mean, there's a lot of conflict here.
But again, that does not necessarily mean that you'd be allowed to do that under federal law. Even if Georgia is saying, hey, we're not going to have any of our own agents come and imprison you or fine you or whatever, that doesn't mean that, in theory, the Department of Justice could not send its own troopers and intervene. So
they're asking you to commit a felony, probably, but if you can get away with it and get back home, you won't be prosecuted.
Well, this is kind of the crux of the dilemma that the cannabis community at large is facing. What do you do when something is so kind of aggressively and openly endorsed by the states, and simultaneously completely forbidden by the federal government? And this is where you get into strong questions of federalism and what the federal government should or should not be doing vis-a-vis state rights.
All right, so what should they be doing? How do you see this working out? Do you think that between now and the end of the Obama administration that something can or might be done?
Personally, no. The legacy of a lame duck president means, unfortunately, that these types of serious policy decisions are not going to be left up to the executive branch in the last 6 months of his office. And beyond that, what we kind of mentioned before, I'm not frankly sure that they should be. Executive action should be taken really in extreme limited circumstances. And I think as a general principle, setting the precedent where the the executive branch, President Obama in this case, can kind of intervene on a national question that the public really has a strong invested interest in. I think that would be problematic and not necessarily a good thing.
Let me just bring something up, okay? Because we're talking about what's legal federally and what's legal by states.
Right.
And we just spoke a few minutes ago about the decision that the DEA didn't make or made a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
I thought that part of their announcement, 6 months ago, that they were going to, make a statement or change something, was also going to address the banking problem, and
Right.
And that's a huge problem in the medical states and the rec states. So this was not addressed, or was it?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to look into that.
Well, what I mean is they really didn't address it. What I'm saying is, did not changing the schedule, but making it legal for more research. I mean, that's what
Right.
Schedule 2 would have done also. So they're doing similar to what Schedule 2 would have done without going to Schedule 2, but the addressing of the banking problem, which is causing huge problems, that really needs to be addressed. The federal government is allowing states, over half of them now, to have medical programs, and 4 or so have recreational programs, and more to come in a few months. So
Yeah.
this is a legal problem that is just devastating our industry. What needs to be changed in order to address the banking?
Again, it's a tricky question, and a lot of that kind of depends on how you break down the role of the federal government versus the role of the state government. So many states believe that banking issues are questions for the state to decide, and we don't really want to see federal government intrusion on how the state goes about dealing with those banking questions. So in Ohio, for example, people are talking about setting up different payment structures at the dispensaries, which, of course, medicinally will be legal come September, although we don't necessarily know the mechanics of what the rules and regulations of opening those dispensaries or getting licenses will entail. But some sort of direct payment structure between the banks and the dispensaries, whereby the owners of the dispensaries don't have access to the same sort of liquid cash that a normal business would, and this way the banks would be able to better regulate and track the amount of money coming and going.
It's really about the 280E also, though, that
Right.
these businesses can't take the same deductions that the regular businesses can do, and it causes a big hardship, and they're paying humongous 70-something% taxes on their income. So
Right, of course. With 280E, a seminal case, the Champ case came out and kind of established that businesses who were to open auxiliary businesses within the same space of their broader cannabis industry could, in theory, get certain tax deductions on otherwise unattainable tax relief that regular cannabis businesses would want to get. So, generally, if you're a normal business, you can get tax reductions both on what are called the COGS, the costs of goods and services, and on other sort of business expenses that a company would need as they, go about making money. So phone bills, airplane tickets to business meetings,
legal expenses.
Yeah, all this kind of stuff. 280E came along and said, well, wait a second. You are still, in fact, allowed to get business tax exemptions on COGS, on your actual cost of the goods and services, but you're not allowed to get exemptions on some of these other secondary business necessities. And then the famous Champ case, I forgot what year it was, but Champ basically came along and said, well, wait a second. If the same dispensary were to offer some ancillary business within the same territorial confines of their dispensary, then they could potentially get an exemption on those businesses. But then a subsequent case came along and said, well, you actually have to show that you didn't set up this ancillary business to skirt the 280E regulation, and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's just a landmine of caveats and exemptions and different linguistic tricks, and this is the state of the cannabis industry. People say we're in the Wild West because we don't really know how each judge will look to precedent and how they want to kind of set the tone for future law. So it's the Wild West.
It's confusing, and at the same time, and you're in the THC legal business, okay? A couple of weeks ago, I believe right after the DEA announced that they wouldn't change the scheduling, the Bar Association of New Mexico, and if I'm not
and Ohio.
And Ohio. I thought Ohio also said and warned people, warned attorneys not to be involved in the cannabis industry. Now, how does that statement affect your day-to-day business?
Sure. Well, a more precise, I think, summary of the advisory opinion. Well, first of all, remember, it was an advisory opinion. Advisory opinions by the Ohio Supreme Court are by definition non-binding. Basically, a couple lawyers wrote and said, hey, what do you think? You know, we have these professional rules of responsibility that we are committed to, that we have to abide by. Cannabis is still federally legal. How do we go about reconciling the new Ohio medicinal legal schema with the federal illegality, and how does that implicate our responsibilities under our professional code of ethics? And the goal of an advisory opinion is for in this case, the Ohio Supreme Court to come out and say, well, look, this is how we would view it, and this is how we interpret your responsibilities. But when lawyers submit questions to the Ohio Advisory Board, they're submitting specific questions. And in this case, the Ohio Supreme Court gave very specific answers to 3 specific questions. One of those questions was, how would the Ohio Supreme Court view an attorney who smokes or consumes cannabis in some way? And they said very clearly, we would consider that problematic and potentially in violation of your duties. The second question, which is kind of the most, I would say, critical and certainly most criticized decision, was how lawyers should go about involving, I suppose, depending on how you look at it, but how lawyers are allowed to involve themselves specifically with the opening of dispensaries, given the legalization schema. So that's really what they address. And they said, look, you know, lawyers are not allowed to facilitate cannabis businesses.
It's like giving advice also? Do they find that if you gave someone some advice that it could be illegal?
No. So I think that was the third question. I'm not looking at it, but off the top of my head, that was the third question. And the Ohio Supreme Court ruled that, in fact, you are allowed to counsel potential businesses or entrepreneurs in the industry as to the legal consequences of doing X or not doing Y. So you are allowed to in a similar way that a criminal attorney would be able to counsel someone about the implications of money laundering. He's not necessarily counseling them as to how to perform any money laundering scheme, in as much as he's advising them what it means to be a money launderer and what sort of legal penalties are at stake. But as far as the dispensary stuff goes, it was only last week, I think maybe last Thursday or Wednesday, the Ohio Supreme Court issued a follow-up notice saying, basically reflecting the criticism and backlash that they've received both from public policymakers and other attorneys, commenting on what the implications are of this advisory opinion. So, how could it be that a business wants to open up a dispensary in the state of Ohio, which of course involves a monumental amount of legal paperwork and other sorts of severe documentation that you really need a lawyer's help on? How could it be that the state of Ohio is both legalizing that and simultaneously saying that lawyers are not allowed to be involved in that process? So it's hard to know what will ultimately happen, but at least the Ohio Supreme Court has given indication that they will amend the rules in some capacity, and hopefully, this business will be done with and pushed aside.
We're all flying by the seat of our pants, like you said earlier. We're sort of pioneers. There's no set road to doing any of this. Before we go, though, just give us a little idea of what the Ohio model for medical is going to be? I know that it's been quite controversial. A couple of years ago, Nick Lachey and was Oscar Robertson were trying to get things passed, and I think rightfully so. I think the public turned all that stuff down. But is there anything really different now? And who's involved? And what is the model for Ohio going to be? Are they going to have flour, or is it CBD only? Tell me about it.
Absolutely. So, the fundamental problem with the law that was attempted to go through, maybe 2 years ago, I don't quite remember, but basically the concern is that there was some corporate cronyism involved, and the people who are directly responsible for pushing the bill through also conveniently drafted the bill in such a way that only they would kind of be able to have any sort of meaningful involvement in the legalization process, and certainly the ownership of the dispensaries and the cultivation. So you would have 11 companies basically who were in charge of the entire industry. And Ohio pushed back and said, no, it's not that we don't want cannabis to be legal, but we don't want this sort of crony capitalism. That may sound cynical, but we don't want this sort of corruption as the bedrock of the legalization process. And so that is why that bill was struck down. Here, we're interestingly facing an alternative controversy in the form of racial affirmative action schemas. And according to the law, 15% of the licenses that will be dispersed and granted by the government must go to minority owners. So many people, of course, think that this poses huge constitutional issues, specifically under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. And it's facing a huge amount of backlash, and I think this is precisely the archetype case that may end up in front of the Supreme Court. Can the state of Ohio legitimately make this racial affirmative action schema for issuing licenses instead of other sorts of government racial schemas where they award contracts, which is a different paradigm in its entirety. As far as the mechanics of how and who will be able to open up a dispensary and what number of licenses they'll be distributing, we don't really know yet. The bill was passed, it laid out a certain set of provisions, but the real kind of nitty-gritty of what's involved has not been released yet. So for example, different states where cannabis is legal say, oh, if you want to open up a dispensary, you have to show that you have $500,000 in the bank that you can put towards the dispensary. B, provide a business plan that shows what sort of security measures you have in place, what sort of CRM you're going to be using to manage both the materials and also the money that comes through. C, show that you're not within XYZ feet, or you're not in violation of this city ordinance, or all this kind of stuff. So we just don't have that yet.
But as far as the program itself, is it a full program? Will they be able to have edibles and flour and capsules and just all the products, or is it constricted?
Well, one of the main constrictions is that even if you are awarded a license, or I should say a permit by a doctor to consume the cannabis, you're not allowed to smoke it. You are allowed to eat it and consume it. I think in oils, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would have to look kind of closely line by line.
So there's no smoking or vaporizing?
Vaporizing, you might be able to. I don't remember off the top of my head. Smoking, I can tell you with near certainty, is not permissible under the program.
That's really a terrible thing because obviously I don't know your background, but I've been smoking this plant for 48 years. And medicinally, there are certain afflictions that you really need a faster ingestion and effect, and smoking can give you an effect in 10 seconds, whereas edibles takes me 4 hours to come onto an edible, and for pain and for nausea and so forth. I think that's something that you guys need to work on to get that changed. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to know more about the THC Legal Group. I want to know what it is you're specializing in, how you're helping people. Let's say, for instance, I'm a domain name investor. I've been investing in cannabis domain names for 10 years or more. So if I wanted to sell my domain name cbdcapsules.com, is this something that legally you would get involved with to help facilitate contracts and so forth and do things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, traditionally, the sale of a domain name, I think, is more of a straightforward process that you might not necessarily need our help. But one area with domain name problems that we see quite a bit is what's called domain name squatting, where people are cynically kind of rigging the system in such a way to profit at other people's expenses. And similarly, people in your shoes who were buying them legitimately, other folks may come along and want to kind of take the domain names from you that you legitimately own. And certainly we're involved in that process as well, in kind of figuring out how to balance public policy interests of allowing a free market to use domain names that they're actually going to then be providing worth with to the public, and of course making sure that people have these digital property rights. So we help tremendously in that regard, and certainly as domain names relate to trademarks and other sorts of preemptive rights given either by the domain name ownership or by the first priority trademark registrant, we help resolve those issues also. And
So let's say, I'm not, I don't know a lot about this stuff. I've got about 100 domain names, for example. But let's say, I've owned the domain name, CBD capsules, for the last 5 years, but didn't trademark that name.
Right.
Okay, but I can show that I had it in, 2000, whatever. So could I lose that domain name, or because I proved that I've owned this since then, does the trademark, are they unable to get a trademark on it?
Well, so a trademark fundamentally is just a source identifier for a good or service that's tethered to a given mark. So when you see the Nike swoosh on a shoe, the symbol of the swoosh itself signifies that the thing that it is attached to belongs to the Nike company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in order to have a trademark, you actually have to not only own the mark, but you also have to be using it within commerce. So just owning, let's just say I were to draw a doodle on a sketch pad and have it sitting there for whatever, 10 years, and someone else were to go use the exact same doodle and then attach it to a good and start selling in the marketplace, I don't actually have a trademark. I just have a doodle.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to use your domain name and put up a website and start selling something from it, then you could develop what is called common law rights to the trademark. So even though you didn't actually take the full legal steps to go and register your trademark, just by using that mark in commerce, you develop a certain set of rights to use that. And of course, you can stop someone else from using that same mark. But just owning the domain name, I think, would not be enough really to stop anyone from doing anything. And in fact, they might be able to force you to give it to them.
Well, let's not tell anybody that, okay? Because I've got too much invested in this stuff. Anyway, It's Abe Cohn from the thclegalgroup.com. How can people, that's their website, how can people get in touch with you if they would like to do some business or get some consultation?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can, of course, visit us directly at thclegalgroup.com. Our email address is info@thclegalgroup.com, and one of our attorneys or admins will get back to you. And please feel free to follow us on Twitter, THC_group.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your time today. Just to pull it full circle, do you think anything's going to happen before the Obama's term, or whoever takes office, next year is going to have that on their plate? So do you think it's just going to wait until after the election?
Yeah, I think it's too monumental of a decision, and frankly, one that's too kind of embedded in the public policy psyche of the public to just be kind of pushed either way by the administration. So I think we'll wait till next year. And I think, honestly, if we have a Hillary administration, we'll stand a far greater chance of seeing full legalization than we would under a Trump-Pence candidacy.
Absolutely. Well, be careful. We need Ohio to go in the right direction for sure. You're a very volatile state there. So Abe Cohn from thclegalgroup.com. Thank you for talking to us about everything cannabis industry and legalities and so forth. And we hope to have you back in the future.
Thank you so much, Larry. This was a real pleasure, and I look forward to being in touch soon.
Thanks so much. We'll be right back after this.
Totally unrehearsed, like all of my men.
has nothing to do with Rush Limbaugh at all.
I went back
want to thank Abe Cohn from the THC Legal Group in Cleveland, Ohio, for talking to us about cannabis and legalities and all that kind of stuff today, and the Ohio program. Also want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you would like to be a guest on the show, if you have a product, a website, you're an activist, you're a patient, you want to tell your story, contact us at info@mmjradio.com. info@mmjradio.com. If you'd like to hear some of our past episodes, we've got about 6.5 years worth. Go to mmjradio.com. Also, my YouTube channel is LSLove88. SoundCloud and Spreaker, we're MMJ Radio. Also on Spreaker, it's and iHeartRadio, it's the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network, CannabisTube.net, and on Now TV, Channel 937. We're also heard on 420radio.org.
The medical marijuana. Shalom. Shalom.